Billy and Mandy aren't children. They're the last two neurons firing in Grimm's dying brain. Maxwell Atoms didn't create a cartoon about kids enslaving death. He documented the 7 minutes it takes for consciousness to fade after cardiac arrest. Every episode is another synapse shutting down. Every character is another memory dissolving. And Grimm isn't their friend. He's trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. You remember the setup. Two kids beat death in a limbo contest. They win ownership of the Grim Reaper. He becomes their reluctant servant. Dark comedy ensues. But you never question the impossible physics of it. How do you enslave death? How do you own entropy itself? How does the fundamental force of ending become a cartoon skeleton with a Jamaican accent? You don't. Unless death is already enslaved. Unless death is trapped somewhere worse than servitude. Unless death himself is dying. Here's what shatters the illusion. The show's original title wasn't Billy and Mandy. In Maxwell Atoms' first pitch to Cartoon Network, it was called The 7 Minutes. 7 minutes. The exact time neuroscientists say the brain remains conscious after the heart stops. The exact window where dying patients report their entire lives flashing before their eyes. Billy represents pure-eyed, chaotic joy, the part of consciousness that refuses to acknowledge mortality. Mandy represents super ego, cold control, the part that knows exactly what's happening but refuses to feel it. And Grimm is the ego caught between them, the self watching itself disappear. Watch any episode through this lens. Really watch it. The background shift without logic. Rooms have no consistent layout. Characters appear and vanish. Time moves in circles. These aren't animation errors. This is how a dying brain processes space. The other characters aren't people. They're fragments. Irwin, the desperate need for connection before the end. Puddin, the sweetness of forgotten childhood. Spurg, violence without consequence because nothing matters anymore. Mindy, vanity desperately asserting itself as everything fades. But here's the detail that changes everything. In the pilot episode, Grimm doesn't just lose a limbo contest. He has a heart attack during it. Watch it again, frame by frame. At the moment he loses, his chest clutches. His scythe drops. His eyes go wide. He doesn't lose the game, he loses his pulse. Everything after that moment, it's happening inside his skull as his brain shuts down. Billy and Mandy aren't children who control death. They're the last two aspects of Grimm's personality fighting over how to process his own ending. Billy wants to laugh at it, Mandy wants to control it, and Grimm, poor Grimm, just wants to understand it. Every supernatural element in the show is a dying brain's attempt to rationalize what's happening. The underworld isn't hell, it's the subconscious. Eris isn't the goddess of chaos, she's the randomness of neural misfiring. Jeff the spider isn't Billy's son, he's arachnoid mater, literally the spider web-like tissue surrounding a dying brain. The show tells you this constantly. Count how many times characters explicitly mention being dead. How many episodes revolve around near-death experiences? How many plots involve consciousness transfer, body swapping, or reality breaking? It's not subtext, it's text, hidden in plain sight. But that's not even the strange part. Maxwell Atoms worked as a mortician's assistant before becoming an animator. Not a joke, not speculation, fact. From 1994 to 1996, he worked at Riverside Memorial in Georgia. Night shifts, preparing bodies, watching families grieve, learning the mechanical reality of death while others processed its meaning. In a 2004 interview with Cartoon Brew, pulled from their archives but preserved in screenshots, he said something that explains everything. I spent 2 years watching what happens in the moments after. Not the dying. That's quick, but the after. The 30 minutes where the family can't accept it. Where they talk to the body like it's still listening. Where they create entire conversations with silence. Billy and Mandy is at 30 minutes. The limbo contest, that's the family arguing with death, begging for more time, bargaining for control. Billy's house, it's the funeral home. Watch the establishing shots. Same layout as Riverside Memorial, same color scheme, same angular architecture that makes no structural sense. His parents, Harold and Gladys, They're the last memories of Grimm's own parents. That's why they're barely there, fading, speaking in disconnected phrases. They're not neglectful, they're neural ghosts running on dying synapses. But here's what Cartoon Network tried to bury. There was a character in the original pitch who never made it to air called the Witness, described in Adam's notes as the one who watches but cannot interfere. The Witness was supposed to be in every episode, standing in backgrounds, never speaking, just observing as reality collapsed. Who was the witness? In Adam's notes, the still conscious part that knows this isn't real but can't wake up. It's Grimm, the real Grimm, watching his own brain create Billy and Mandy to process what's happening. The network killed the character. Too dark, they said. Too existential for children, but Adams kept him in, hidden. Look at any wide shot in the show, any crowd scene, there's always one figure that doesn't match. Hooded, still, watching. It's the witness. It's Grimm observing his own death dream. The episode Dream a Little Dream isn't about dreams. Read Adam's original script. It's about Grimm realizing he's inside his own dying mind. Billy's dream? Pure denial. Everything is fine and fun. Mandy's dream? Pure control, reshaping reality through will. And Grimm's dream? He dreams of being alive, having flesh, feeling warmth. The episode ends with him waking up. But waking up to what? Another layer of dying, another minute closer to the end. Here's what destroys everything you thought you knew. The show's most recurring location isn't Billy's house or the underworld. It's Endsville, Endsville, the Ville where everything ends. It's not a town name, it's a diagnosis. It's where consciousness goes to die. Every resident of Endsville represents a different stage of death acceptance. General scar, anger at the unfairness. Hoss Delgado, bargaining through violence. Dracula, depression masked as comedy. Dick, acceptance through documentation. That's why nobody ages. Why time doesn't progress. Why every episode resets. You can't grow in Endsville, you can only end. But here's the evidence that Maxwell Atoms left for us to find. The background music, when isolated and slowed down by 600%, contains something hidden. Not backwards masking, not subliminal messages, heartbeats. Every episode's background track is built on a heartbeat rhythm, but it gets slower as the series progresses. Episodes 1 through 10, 70 beats per minute. Episodes 40 through 50, 40 beats per minute. The final episode, 10 beats per minute. The show is literally counting down Grimm's dying pulse, and that's when everything starts to align. Here's what Maxwell Atoms was actually documenting. On March 15th, 1996, there was an incident at Riverside Memorial. Not publicly reported, covered by NDAS, but findable if you know where to look. A mortician's assistant, 23 years old, initials MA, had a cardiac event while working alone. Security footage shows him collapsing at 11:47 p.m. He wasn't found until 11:54 p.m. 7 minutes. The assistant survived. Barely. But he reported something during recovery that the hospital tried to suppress. He said he experienced the entire 7 minutes as years of adventures with 2 children. One, incandescently stupid, but joyful. One, terrifyingly intelligent, but emotionless. He said death was there too, but death was scared. Death was confused. Death didn't understand why he was dying when he was supposed to be eternal. The assistant was Maxwell Atoms. Billy and Mandy aren't fictional characters. They're the 2 polarized responses Adam's brain created to process its own death. The eternal child who refuses to understand. The cynical child who refuses to care. Every episode is a memory from those 7 minutes. Compressed, symbolized, transformed into animation because the reality was too much to process. The mushroom cloud explosion that appears randomly in episodes, that's the defibrillator. The moment they tried to restart his heart. To Grimm's dying brain, it would feel like reality exploding. Fred Fredberger is an annoying comic relief. He's a sound of the life support machines. That's why he only says his name. Fred Fredberger. Fred Fredberger. It's the rhythm of the ventilator, the repetition of mechanical breathing. The episode Billy and Mandy's Big Boogie Adventure, where they travel through time. That's Adam's brain reviewing his entire life in compressed seconds. Past, present, future, all happening simultaneously as neurons fire their last signals. Adams hid one final confession in the show's production notes. Every episode was supposed to end the same way: a black screen, the sound of a flat line, then silence. Cartoon Network wouldn't allow it. They said it was too real. But Adams found another way. Watch how every episode actually ends. The iris out, the circle closing in on the characters. That's not a cartoon convention. That's vision fading. That's an optical nerve shutting down. That's the last thing a dying brain sees. The world becoming a shrinking circle of light. Every single episode. We watched death closing in 26 times a season. We laughed as consciousness collapsed into darkness. We made it a children's show. But here's what haunts me. Adam survived his 7 minutes. He got to wake up. He got to make his show. But in every episode, Grim never escapes. He never breaks free. He stays trapped between Billy's denial and Mandy's control. Forever dying. Forever conscious. Forever caught in the moment between heartbeats. The show asks a question it never answers. What if death doesn't know it's dead? What if we're all just neurons firing in something else's dying brain, creating entire worlds to avoid accepting our own ending? Billy laughs because he doesn't know. Mandy controls because she does. And Grim serves them both because he's terrified to find out which one is right. We spent 6 years watching death die, and we called it a comedy. Maybe that's the only way to face it. Maybe Billy had it right all along. Maybe the only response to entropy is laughter. Or maybe Mandy knew the truth. None of it matters because we're already gone. The show never tells you which child wins, because in those 7 minutes between heartbeats, nobody really knows. Maybe we're all just waiting to find out. In 2019, Adams did one final interview. Podcast, small audience, mostly ignored. But he said something that reframes everything. Grim isn't death enslaved by children. Grim is what death becomes when it faces itself. Billy and Mandy aren't controlling him. They're teaching him the only two ways to face ending, with stupid joy or cold acceptance. Then quieter, I was Grim, on that table, flatlining, and my brain created two children to help me understand what was happening. He paused. Billy told me it was funny, Mandy told me it didn't matter, and somehow, between them, I found 7 minutes of peace in the scariest moment of my life. The interview ends with him saying, "Every kid who watched the show learned what I learned. Death isn't the enemy. Death is just confused and scared and trying his best. And sometimes, if you're brave enough or stupid enough, you can make friends with the thing that terrifies you most." But here's the truth beneath the truth. Adams didn't create Billy and Mandy after his near-death experience. He created it during. The entire show, all 79 episodes, is what his brain generated in those 7 minutes. Every plot, every character, every joke, it all happened in the gap between heartbeats. When he woke up, he had the entire series in his head. Complete, perfect, like it had already been broadcast. He spent the next 6 years animating what he'd already seen, transcribing his own death dream for Cartoon Network. That's why the show feels different from everything else. It's not written, it's remembered, it's not created, it's documented. Every child who watched Billy and Mandy was watching the inside of a dying brain, learning how consciousness processes its own ending, laughing at jokes that neurons made to comfort themselves. The show's final episode, Underfist, wasn't supposed to be the end. Adams had pitched season 8, but something happened. The heartbeat in the background music finally stopped. Not in the show. In Adams. He said he couldn't write anymore. The story was complete. But what he meant was, the 7 minutes were over. He'd animated every second of his death experience. There was nothing left to document.